Yep, we're gonna fix some rust. So the rust we've got are on both sides of the lower windshield cowl panel. Water got in behind the rubber, and where the rubber was laid across the windshield right here created the perfect environment for the rust to happen and eat. The rust went through here, or the water went through here, down into the floorboard and rusted out the pedal box. So we got to fix the pedal box. That's the most important part, but we want to go ahead and fix this first. As you can see, this side is ate up in the same area. Now they sell this piece. It's roughly $150, $175 for the piece to repair this. We're gonna make it. All right, so the first step into making this piece is that we've got to make us a pattern. I got a piece of paper here, and yes, I went ahead and started to make some type of a pattern. So we know it's rusted from here to here. I got a piece of paper that covered that much of the area. I laid it down in there. I pressed it in and I drew my lines. Held that tight, drew this line, held that tight, drew this line, and then I gave myself a little bit to fold over the edge right here because I can see that it's got a couple of spots. And that is it. That's all that's messed up on this side. So we'll use this pattern reversed on the other side. Let's get some metal and see if we can't make this piece, get it welded in. All right, so what I've done here, I've got my paper pattern, and I went ahead, double checked it, test fitted it, and then I cut it down the center of the line. That's just so I can get a better reference. Went ahead and traced the outside of it first, all the way around before I cut it in half. Then I cut it in half down the line that I knew was a good line that I sketched out on the paper while it was on the body. So I got this line here. This is where I messed up the first time, so I'm not going to use that line. And then I took the other half and I laid it up against my good lines from the other piece, and then I marked those, folded it back, and I marked that. So let's cut this out. We're going to have to reverse some of these lines on the other side because some of the bends will be on this side, some of them will be on this side. Got it roughly cut out, and let's see how close it is to our pattern. Let's see about doing some bending on it. We can always clean these edges up shortly. All right, so what I'm doing is putting the tipping dies on. That's going to help us get those tight radiuses. Let's get a little bit of a bite. Go around this edge. And if this don't work, we'll do it again. All right, so here I'm using the tipping dies while I'm putting a little bit of pressure upward with my right hand just to help the die bend. It's starting to put a little curve in it. We'll have to address that in a minute. We get closer to being finished. All right, so let's straighten up our piece of metal, double check our pattern, and put the marks to bend it the opposite direction on the back side. All right, let's go see if this is going to work better. So we're gonna go see how close this is, and then we'll know whether we're gonna keep going forward or not. All right, just to show you, that's what I've come up with so far. All right, so last night my camera died. I haven't cut this part out yet because I need to remove the dash before I do it. But here's the area that was under the rubber on the driver's side. Here's the piece that I made. It too was not a fun piece to make. So this will fit perfect, hopefully, when I get this piece cut out. We saved a couple $100 by making this part, and the rest of it is all original Porsche. So I'm happy about that. Every time I give it a little bit of love, it bites me. So I've got a patch right here because I took the window out that was on this side and I started removing the paint. Guess what I found? Yep, a bad repair. Let me pull this tape off, which is the pattern for the repair. That's how big the repair is going to be. We're going to make this piece here shortly, but let me show you the surprise I found. Be careful removing this. This is when we lay this out flat, it's going to be a great pattern that we can use to make our replacement panel. Basically what I did, I laid tape out, I cut it where I wanted it, and then I drew the lines that we're going to need to bend and break. How about that Swiss cheese? Let's get closer. All right, so what you're looking at is an old repair where they just laid fiberglass putty down on it. Yep. It's heartbreaking. You can even see the indentation right there where they pushed it down through the rust hole. Folks, that's not how you fix it. Look at there, I found the spot where that one went. That's not how you fix rust, guys. So what happened here, under the wheel well is a undercoating that you've seen me paint over in the trunk and scrape off in some other areas. When that breaks down, it allows water to get trapped in the cracks underneath as this wheel spins around. That water stays in that crack and will end up finding its way out on the opposite side. So that's what this did. The whole car is not rusted out. These are just typical places that happens on almost every Porsche that's in a moist area, and that's what happened to this one. All right, now we need to make this just a little oversized, and then we'll come back and trim it and get it to fitting perfect. But you can see it's going to be a tricky one. You've got a very slight curve here, and then down here you've got a sharp bend. So it's going to be a little tricky. We got to get it done. There's the spots all cleaned up. Everything underneath is bare metal. You can see up underneath the fender well, and it's also the same way right here. It all cleaned up really well. I cut out more than I needed, but let me show you what the back side of this stuff looks like. When you don't cut out more than you need, all these little pits in there can come back and get you later. Guys, you're gonna do one of these things, just do it right. Or pay somebody to do it right for you. This guy did not do it right, and now I'm the guy that's finding all the surprises. All right, so the yellow tape represents the pattern that we made. And I've cut this oversized piece of 20 gauge. Now the body panel here actually gauges out at 21, 22. So this material here is a little thicker. And look how easy it bends. It's amazing when we put these bends in, what it'll do. You can see how flexible the material is on a car, even as a quarter. You've seen me use this before. This is just a layout. It's called Toolmaker's Blue. It's a layout ink. Easy comes off, you know, when you get through the panel. So we're gonna lay this out on here lightly. We're gonna let that dry up. And then we're gonna scribe our lines with a sharp awl. And that way we can get a little bit better product at the end. All right, now that I've got this sprayed down with the layout tooling dye, I'm going to use our pattern and try to make these lines more precise because they're not squiggly and sketched out like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my gauge here, and this gauge is pretty good most of the time finding out a perfect bend. I've got a few of these, and what I've noticed, let me get you closer, come on in. By taking this gauge here that's laid out, if you can see, put something behind it, you can see the numbers on the gauges. It's got a little sharp point. I've taken this and laid it over on our pattern, and I can see that 0.375 is almost perfect, pretty perfect. And this is going to be the overhang anyway that goes up and spot welds under where the window rubber goes. So what I'm going to do, I've already cut this outside line flush with the tape pattern. Peel this back a little bit. Get the pattern out of the way. Take the 3.75 and run it down through here just one time. How about 2 times? All right, and then that's scribed a line that we can follow and bend that over. And with this being curved, we can't put it in a break and do it. Now, if you wanted to do it by hand, you can do it by hand. It'll be a little bit crude. If you don't have a bead roller, take you a pair of smooth-jawed pliers or a crescent wrench, and you go in here and just take small bites out of it all the way around. All right. Now, I use simple tools on this channel. I don't use any of my so-called professional tools when I'm doing stuff. Very rarely if I'll do that. I'm not trying to show off tools or anything like that. I'm helping you guys at home using tools that you may have. All right. Now, on the next one, this pattern here, I don't have anything that's that wide. And it's not the same from this end to this end. It was done in a press when they built the quarter. So what I'm doing is I'm going down through here and I'm folding up the tape right on that line. And I want to get it as close to that line as I can. All right, so I think I've got it where I want it. And you can see how smooth this is now versus the sketch line that I had on there. All right, so there we go. So what I'll do first is I'm going to bend this line. Then I'm going to come back and put this line on the back side. The reason I'm going to do that is after I bend this line, I can go and adjust this line if I need to. We'll make sure that these line up with the factory marks that we've got on the quarter. All right, let's go see what we can do with this. All right, so we're back to the bead roller, and I used this on the other piece that you saw me do on the windshield. I'll explain things to you. This die and this die make up a tipping die, and that'll tip an edge in a 90-degree angle, like this right here. This is a skateboard wheel, roller skate wheel. I made it into a tipping die on this side so it won't groove the metal, and it gives it a softer edge. And on this side, I have it running flat. And what it does here, when it's running flat on the wheel, and you can see I've used it, so it's got grooves and stuff in it. This will keep the panel a softer bend, and it also helps not mar up. It also helps to not mar up the metal. So the first one I'm going to do is we're going to run it through and do this edge, tip this up, and then we're going to check the pattern. You can see it tipping the edge, and what I'm looking at is my scribe line in the center of that die. All right, that came out pretty good considering it was a manual roller. We want to do it again and step it up just a little bit. Loosen this up a little bit. Run it one more time lightly. I don't have much pressure on it now. I've got it tipped as high up as I need it to go. Nice. You can't see it, but there you go. Can you see the curve? That's because we tipped it on that curved line. And you can see how wavy this top is. That is just like the tape. How when we bent the tape up, the tape didn't have anywhere to go. Flat here, flat there, and it's got a swell right there in the center because this window and the quarter panel does that. Well, our panel that we just made is straight across here. So we put it in here and test it. You can see the top right here is not down like the other sides are. So now we have to go in here and shrink this area. All right, we want to shrink this edge and just gather it up just a little at a time. And start on the outside edges and work our way into the center. And when we get to the center, we're gonna go a little slower and get to the outside edge, speed up and drag it a little faster. And you can see a little bit of curvature. So let's go check that out. It's a little flat right here. May need to stand a little bit more right there. Let's go check it first. But I think we went just a tad too much right here and right here. So the center 2 inches. But let's get a look at the top of it now, where we've got our line that we scribed. You see how it lines up with that side, and now it doesn't line up so much with this side. So now we can adjust that. It actually lines up a little bit, but you can see the crisp line is off by about 1/16 of an inch. So we want to fix that now. Let's do that now. All right, so I scribed the line on the back side. I went ahead and rolled it through the tipping die about 2 times just to give it a line to bend from. Now we're going to put it over in this blacksmith vise. We're going to bend it a little bit. And here's the line that we're going to bend it on. Scribed on both sides now. All right, so right here, I am doing that gradual bend, sharp on one end and just barely rolled on the other. So there's not really any way to do that with the machinery, so we're just doing it by hand. in the vise. And then this end right here, I'm going to smooth it out just a little bit. So before we overcorrect it, let's go take a look and see if it fits. It kind of looks like the piece that we cut off. All right, so here we go with the first look. Let's clamp this on here, or we can see how things look. All right, a little bit more tweaking. All right, at this point, it looks pretty good. A little bit more tweaking, but it is on top of the panel that comes off. So you have to understand that. And you don't want it to be oversized. As I was saying earlier, you'd rather have it undersized so you can build it up with a very skim coat of Bondo. Because if it's oversized, you'd have to skim coat this entire quarter, which we're gonna have to skim coat anyway because we've welded in these flares. There was previous body damage to the body and to this fender that we removed the Bondo. That's the only drawback about using these used flares, is you have to deal with whatever you get. So don't let this top line fool you. That's just a scratch. The bend is actually right in here, and it starts off very light and goes back to a sharp bend. So it's not a very easy panel to make, but it's not a very hard panel to make. And we made this with basic tools. So if this piece, you'd have to replace this whole quarter to get this piece, or buy this whole quarter. Some guys say that would be the best way to go. Hey, I choose to do it this way. It's my car, my project, and I'm not trying to break the bank to do it, but I am fixing it right. Now we need to just paint this with the dye, scratch this off, and cut it back just a little bit and start fitting this to where we can butt weld, TIG it in, and then it'll be all one piece. And it's best to stand back, kind of get a perspective of what it's going to look like. If it fits like you're ready for it to fit, it's time to get after it. Let's cut out a piece and weld her in. Let's trim that out. All right, so I'm not using any kind of special nibbler or any kind of special pro tool. I am just using some wore out pair of tin snips to trim this up. I didn't cut it on the line that I drew. I cut it to where I left a little bit. I can go back now with a file or a grinder and get it right to the edge. Test fit it one more time. There it is, ready to weld in. The piece probably cost all of $1. Basically, it didn't cost that because that's a piece of scrap. Took a little bit of time. I may have maybe 2 hours into shaping that. And then we'll get it welded in and finished off maybe another 30 minutes, so 2.5 hours. And we saved an original part of the car. Let me know what you would have done. These clamps right here are keeping this gap open a little bit, but I put those in there to hold it When I remove these clamps to weld it, this will line up. Now, if you haven't ever seen these little sheet metal clamps, basically it's just a piece of square stock with a slot in it. Got this little clamp right here with a nut on the end of it. You slide this down in between the two panels, just like that. You put the square stock in and tighten it up, and it pulls the two panels together. And then you can weld it. Now, I fit mine with that, but that's a little bit too much of a gap if I'm going to TIG something. I want it really close. I want it touching. And the way I made this panel, it will touch. And I do like to TIG because when I TIG, I can blend all this as I go with a hammer and dolly. With a MIG, you'll break the weld trying to dolly the weld back out and get it smooth. So I don't think I'm going to show welding anything right here because I'm not ready to do that. Anyway, there's where we're at. It's crazy how every time I turn a corner, this car's biting me back. But this is behind the door striker that I was having trouble getting off. And once it came off, you can see everywhere where the body touched the nut plate behind has rusted. But it's not as bad as it looks. Everywhere that you see there's tape around is where I just made this pattern from. And actually it goes like that. I made this pattern, so now we're gonna make this out of metal. Once we get this made out of metal, we'll transfer it back to the body. Now these reference points right here are where the door jamb striker, you see the little point at the top right above the hole, and there's one on the bottom. Those actually are reference points to line this back up. The factory does that. Now, it may not be perfect for a door adjustment, but that's where they initiate their adjustments from. So anyway, let's make this piece right here, and then we'll cut this out and address the damage to the nut plate, which serves no purpose at all except for the floating of those nuts behind it so that you can put the striker on. But we're going to fix this, order a new one if we have to, and move on. Well, I've cut our pattern out, and this was the culprit right here. This set in there behind there, and it was spot welded in this corner, spot welded down here, and then it was welded with a previous repair right there. And that's where most of the rust was coming out. This plate, I cut extra. We have good metal behind everywhere. So let's take this pattern that we cut out, go make us a piece of metal, and see how close we can get to getting it to fit. And this is the crude version. I need to file it down on the edges, but this is the pattern that we cut out. We put it on the metal. We cut the metal out. It will be welded, braced from behind, and just as good as new, if not just a little bit stronger. So, yep. We just made. All right, so behind this tape is the panel we just made, and I've got all my drilled holes in it for the nut plate to go back behind it. But we're waiting on a new nut plate that I had to buy. I didn't have to, but it's easier to buy it because the nuts were stripped and rusty. So it's easier to start with new on that, get that nut plate in, and we're ready to go. I also started roughing in for the rust repair that was underneath this window. This panel is not quite finished yet. Got some more tweaking and stuff to go, and I did it the same way as the other side. So I hope you guys enjoyed the little video making this panel, making the panel for the front windshield. I've got a couple more panels I'm gonna go ahead and make, and then we'll get all this stuff welded in, and we'll come back and look at it. Once we do that and the floor repair, the body itself is ready for body work and paint. I may go ahead and do that and then install the motor. Then everything's finished, wired and all that. Then I can work on the doors and the front fenders. The hood and the deck lid are going to be easy, I hope, but every time I start working on this car, something pops up. We stop what we're doing, we fix it right, and we move on. That's the stall part of it. So anyway, thanks for liking, tagging, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. It really means a lot. Give me the thumbs up because that really makes the channel grow. And the more we grow, the more people we can get out there and touch and help get out in the garage and build something. See you in the next episode.